What if the reason you're losing strength has nothing to do with aging and everything to do with what's on your plate? Not a small oversight, a massive one. The advice you've been given goes something like this: slow down. Your metabolism is winding down. Some muscle loss is just part of getting older. That advice is not just outdated, it's dangerous, because the truth is muscle loss after 60 is not a life sentence. In most cases, it's a fixable nutritional gap. Today I'm walking you through 20 protein foods chosen specifically for the aging body, foods that rebuild lean tissue, restore strength, and support the kind of independence that lets you carry your own groceries, climb your own stairs, and get off the floor without help. Stick around, because number 6 has more usable omega-3 than salmon, and a mineral most people over 60 are quietly deficient in. And number 10 is a fermented staple that villages in coastal Japan have eaten daily for generations, long before anyone in the West had a name for gut health. This isn't a supplement pitch, and it isn't a list built for 25-year-old gym goers with different recovery needs and different digestive capacity. Every food here was chosen with one filter. Does it specifically address the mechanisms that break down in the aging body, blunted amino acid sensitivity, slower digestion, chronic low-grade inflammation, and mineral gaps that quietly widen year after year without anyone noticing until strength is already gone? Some of these will already be sitting in your kitchen. Others you may never have heard of. Both categories matter, because it's rarely one dramatic missing food that causes a decline. It's a slow accumulation of small, unaddressed gaps that compound quietly for years. By the time weakness becomes noticeable enough to mention to a doctor, the underlying nutritional shortfall has usually been building for a decade or more, which is exactly why starting now, today, with whatever you can realistically change, matters more than waiting for a perfect plan you may never actually get around to starting. Let's get into the list. Number 1. Wild-caught salmon, the anti-inflammatory rebuilder most people undercook and underuse. Salmon gets treated like a special occasion food, something for a dinner party, not a daily staple. That's backwards, because for muscle preservation after 60, salmon may be one of the single most useful proteins available. A 4-ounce serving delivers roughly 25 grams of complete protein, all 9 essential amino acids present in meaningful amounts, including a strong dose of leucine, the amino acid responsible for switching on muscle protein synthesis. But salmon's real advantage isn't the protein alone. It's the omega-3 fatty acids that come packaged with it. Research on omega-3 supplementation in older adults has shown improved rates of muscle protein synthesis when omega-3s are combined with protein intake, essentially making the protein you eat more effective at building tissue. That's a mechanism most people have never heard of. It isn't just what you eat. It's what makes what you eat work harder. Omega-3s also fight the low-grade chronic inflammation that accelerates sarcopenia, the medical term for age-related muscle wasting. Choose wild-caught when you can, since farm salmon carries a different, less favorable fat profile, generally lower in the specific EPA and DHA fatty acids that drive most of these benefits, and higher in overall fat content that doesn't carry the same anti-inflammatory advantage, largely a reflection of what the fish itself is fed rather than any inherent difference in the species. A study following older adults over several months found that those supplementing with fish-derived omega-3s alongside a structured resistance program gained more lean muscle mass than those doing the same program without the added omega-3 intake, suggesting the fat itself isn't passive. It's actively supporting the training response, which reframes salmon less as a garnish on a healthy plate and more as a functional part of the recovery process itself. Bake it at 400 degrees for 12 minutes with olive oil and lemon, or pan-sear it skin side down for a crisp crust. And a simple test for doneness, gently flaking the thickest part with a fork, prevents the overcooking that leaves fish dry and less appealing on repeat, which is often the real reason people stop eating fish regularly in the first place. 2 servings a week is enough to meaningfully shift your omega-3 status. And canned wild salmon works just as well nutritionally as fresh when fresh isn't practical or affordable, making this an easy food to keep stocked year-round rather than something reserved for special trips to the fish counter. Number 2. Pasture-raised turkey breast, the lean protein workhorse nobody gets excited about. Turkey breast has a reputation problem. It shows up at Thanksgiving, gets forgotten the other 364 days of the year, and rarely gets credit for being one of the most efficient protein sources on the planet. A 4-ounce serving delivers around 34 grams of protein, with barely 2 grams of fat, an unusually high protein-to-calorie ratio that matters enormously for older adults who need to hit daily protein targets without overloading on calories they no longer burn as easily. Turkey is also rich in tryptophan and B vitamins, particularly B6, which is directly involved in amino acid metabolism. the biochemical process your body uses to break dietary protein into the building blocks your muscles actually use. Without adequate B6, protein you eat is used less efficiently, no matter how much of it you consume. That's a quiet bottleneck few people ever address. And it's one reason two people eating identical amount of protein can see very different results depending on whether the rest of their diet is supplying the cofactor nutrients that protein metabolism actually depends on, a detail almost never mentioned in generic protein intake advice. Turkey also delivers selenium, a mineral involved in reducing oxidative stress in muscle tissue during recovery. Roast a whole breast on Sunday and portion for the week. Poach cutlets and broth for a softer texture that's easier to chew, or grind it for a leaner take on classic dishes. And keeping a portion supply in the freezer means a fast, high-protein meal is always closer than takeout on the nights. Cooking feels like too much effort, which matters more for consistency than any single perfect meal ever will. Season generously, since lean protein needs flavor support to stay appealing meal after meal, and don't shy away from dark meat occasionally either. It carries slightly more fat, but also more zinc and iron in the breast, making it mixable to smart weekly rotation rather than an all-or-nothing choice. Number 3. Pastured eggs, the original complete protein with an underrated brain-muscle connection. Eggs spent decades unfairly villainized over cholesterol concerns that modern research has largely walked back. That reputational damage cost older adults one of the most bioavailable proteins available to them. One large egg delivers 6 grams of complete protein with a biological value, a measure of how efficiently the body actually uses a protein. That ranks among the highest of any food, plant, or animal. 2 eggs at breakfast deliver a real, usable leucine dose that helps trigger muscle protein synthesis first thing in the morning, which matters because most people front-load carbohydrates at breakfast and back-load protein at dinner, missing the metabolic window when their bodies are most primed to build. Eggs also deliver choline, a nutrient involved in the neuromuscular signaling between brain and muscle, the communication pathway that governs coordination, balance, and reaction time. Choline deficiency has been linked to declines in the signaling efficiency, and most adults, especially older adults, fall short of daily choline recommendations, often without realizing it since choline isn't routinely tested for the way iron or B12 are, meaning the deficiency tends to go entirely unaddressed unless someone specifically increases intake of a food like eggs. Scramble them soft with a splash of milk for easier chewing, poach them over sautéed greens, or hard-boil a batch for grab-and-go snacking, and hard-boiled eggs in particular travel well, making them one of the easiest ways to keep a real protein source on hand for moments hunger it's away from home, whether that's a car ride, a waiting room, or a long afternoon of errands. Don't discard the yolk. Nearly all the choline and half the protein live there, and the fear that ate away at egg consumption for decades has been substantially revised by more recent research, showing dietary cholesterol has a far smaller effect on blood cholesterol for most people than saturated fat and refined carbohydrate intake do, a distinction that took the nutrition establishment far too long to communicate clearly. Number 4. Sardines, the small fish with mineral profile that outperforms nearly everything on this list. This is a food I promised you at the start, and it earns a spot. Sardines are inexpensive, shelf-stable, and almost entirely ignored by people over 60 who associate canned fish with a bygone era rather than nutritional shortcut. A 3.75-ounce tin delivers about 23 grams of protein, more usable omega-3 fatty acids per serving than a comparable portion of salmon, and because sardines are eaten bones and all, a calcium load that rivals a glass of milk. That calcium arrives alongside vitamin D and phosphorus, a combination your body needs to actually deposit that calcium into bone and support the muscle contractions that depend on calcium signaling at the cellular level. Sardines are also one of the few whole foods containing meaningful coenzyme Q10, a compound involved in mitochondrial energy production, the process your muscle cells use to generate the fuel behind every contraction. Mitochondrial efficiency declines steadily with age, and CoQ10 levels decline right along with it. Most people never think to replace it through food, reaching instead for a supplement bottle, when a couple of servings of small oily fish would supply a meaningful, food-based amount alongside everything else sardines already bring to the table. Eat sardines straight from the tin with a squeeze of lemon, mash them into a quick pate with olive oil and mustard, or toss them into a tomato-based pasta sauce, where the flavor mellows considerably, becoming barely noticeable to anyone at the table who insists they don't like fish, a trick that has quietly won over more skeptics than any direct argument about nutrition ever could. 2 tins a week is a realistic, sustainable target, And because sardines sit low on the marine food chain, they carry a fraction of the mercury exposure that larger predatory fish like tuna or swordfish do, making them one of the few fish you can eat frequently without that particular concern, a real advantage for anyone who wants the benefits of regular fish intake, without having to track exposure limits the way they would with larger species. We're at the quarter mark, and this next stretch is where the plant proteins really start pulling their weight for anyone reducing meat intake or looking for variety. Number 5. Red lentils. The fast-cooking legume that closes a common protein gap. Lentils get lumped together as one undifferentiated category, but red lentils in particular deserve individual attention because they cook faster, digest more easily, and deliver a nutrient profile especially suited to older adults. One cooked cup delivers around 18 grams of protein, alongside a substantial dose of folate and iron. The iron in lentils is non-heme iron, absorbed less efficiently than the iron in meat, but pairing lentils with a source of vitamin C, tomatoes, citrus, bell peppers can dramatically improve absorption, a simple food pairing trick most people never learn. Lentils are also exceptionally high in resistant starch and soluble fiber, which feed the beneficial bacteria in the colon responsible for producing short-chain fatty acids, compounds that recent research has connected not just to digestive health, but to markers of systemic inflammation throughout the body, including inflammation localized in and around muscle tissue itself. Tying a food most people think of purely as a fiber source directly back to the muscle-building goal at the center of this entire list. Emerging research connect a healthy population of these bacteria to reduce systemic inflammation and, downstream, better protein utilization throughout the body. In other words, the fiber in lentils may be doing quiet work to help your body use the protein in everything else you eat that day, which is part why nutrition researchers increasingly talk about gut health and muscle health as connected systems rather than separate concerns to be addressed independently. Red lentils cook in about 15 minutes without soaking, breaking down into a soft, almost creamy texture that works beautifully in soups, dals, and purees for anyone managing chewing difficulty. Simmer them with cumin, turmeric, and a splash of lemon for a dish that's as gentle on digestion as it is high in protein. And because they cook down so quickly, red lentils are an easy way to add a genuine protein boost to an otherwise vegetable-heavy soup without needing a separate protein component on the side. Simplifying meal prep for anyone who finds juggling multiple components exhausting by the end of the day, which for many older adults is precisely when motivation to cook a full meal starts to fade. Number 6. Chickpeas. The pantry staple with an underappreciated blood sugar advantage. Chickpeas are common enough that most people stop noticing them, reaching past canned for something that feels more novel. That's a mistake, because chickpeas offer a specific advantage that matters more after 60 than almost any other legume. A remarkably low glycemic index combined with solid 15 grams of protein per cooked cup. That low glycemic index keeps blood sugar and insulin levels stable after meal, which matters directly for muscle building, because insulin resistance, increasingly common with age, interferes with the muscle's ability to take up circulating amino acids. A food that keeps insulin sensitivity intact is quietly protecting your muscle-building capacity every time you eat it. Chickpeas also deliver manganese and folate in meaningful amounts, both cofactors in the enzymatic repair processes that follow physical activity, and their combination of protein and slow-digesting carbohydrate makes them a genuinely satisfying food for anyone trying to manage appetite and weight simultaneously with maintaining muscle mass. Two goals that can otherwise feel like they're pulling in opposite directions for anyone who assumes higher protein automatically means higher calories. Then they're comfortable eating. Roast them until crisp for a high-protein snack that replaces chips. Blend them into hummus with plenty of olive oil for a spread that pairs protein with healthy fat. Or simmer them into stews where they hold their shape and soak up flavor for hours, becoming almost meaty in texture the longer they're allowed to cook. A single can drain and rinse gives you nearly 2 full servings, and the liquid itself, often called aquafaba, whips into a surprisingly effective egg white substitute. So nothing about this pantry staple needs to go to waste, right down to the starchy liquid most people pour straight down the drain without ever realizing what it's capable of in the kitchen. Number 7. Bone broth, the collagen-rich sipping protein built for joints as much as muscle. Bone broth had a moment as a wellness trend and then quietly faded from conversation, which is unfortunate because the science behind it, particularly for older adults, is genuinely compelling. A cup of properly made bone broth delivers 6 to 12 grams of protein depending on concentration, and unlike most proteins on this list, that protein is overwhelmingly collagen, the structural protein that makes up tendons, ligaments, and the connective tissue surrounding every muscle fiber. Collagen isn't a complete protein in the traditional sense. It's low in some essential amino acids, but it's exceptionally rich in glycine and proline, two amino acids directly involved in maintaining the connective tissue that allows muscle to actually transmit force to your joints. You can have strong muscle fibers and still struggle with mobility if the connective tissue around them is deteriorating, which is precisely what tends to happen with age. Research on collagen supplementation combined with resistance exercise has shown improvements in connective tissue strength in older adults specifically, with some studies reporting increases in tendon and ligament thickness after consistent use over several months. A finding that matters because tendon stiffness and joint pain are frequently what stop people from doing the very strength training that would otherwise preserve their muscle. Sip it warm as a between-meal snack. Use it as a cooking liquid for grains instead of water, or reduce it further into a rich base for soups and sauces. Each preparation quietly folding additional collagen into meals that otherwise wouldn't contain much of it at all. Look for broth simmered a minimum of 12 hours. Shorter cook times extract far less collagen, and a broth that gels firmly once refrigerated is a reliable visual sign that it was simmered long enough to actually pull meaningful collagen out of the bones rather than just producing thin, flavored water that looks the part but delivers little of the actual benefit, which is unfortunately what most store-bought broths on the shelf actually offer. Number 8. Miso, the fermented soybean paste that quietly outperforms most Western condiments. This is the food I mentioned at the beginning, and it deserves the build-up. Miso is fermented soybean paste, a foundational ingredient in Japanese cooking for over 1,000 years, and has been eaten daily along coastal regions of Japan by populations with some of the longest health spans on record. 2 tablespoons deliver around 4 grams of protein, modest on paper, but miso is rarely eaten alone. It's used to season and enrich other protein sources, which is exactly where its real value lies. The fermentation process that creates miso produces a dense population of beneficial bacteria and enzymes that predigest much of the soy protein, making the amino acids inside it dramatically easier to absorb in unfermented soy. Miso is also one of the richest dietary sources of vitamin K2 in a plant-based form, the same nutrient responsible for directing calcium into bone and muscle tissue rather than arterial walls. Cardiologists studying populations with unusually low rates of cardiovascular calcification have pointed repeatedly to fermented soy intake as a contributing factor, and while the research is still developing, the pattern is consistent enough across multiple observational studies that it's hard to dismiss as coincidence, especially given how directly K2's mechanism connects to the muscle-bone system this entire list is built around. Whisk a spoonful into warm water for traditional miso soup, blend it into salad dressings for a savory depth, or rub it onto fish and vegetables before roasting, where it caramelizes slightly under heat and develops a deeper, almost umami-forward crust. A little goes a long way, and its sodium content means moderation matters. Roughly 1 to 2 tablespoons a day is a sustainable target, and lighter, less aged white miso offers a gentler entry point for anyone new to flavor before working toward the deeper, salter red and dark varieties, which develop their intensity through months or even years of additional fermentation time. And stocking both a light and dark variety in the fridge opens up a wider range of dishes than committing to just one. If you're finding this useful, the full list of sourcing links I personally use for these foods, especially fermented and specialty items that aren't always easy to find locally, are in the description below. It's not that you can't find substitutes at any grocery store, but quality genuinely changes the nutritional payoff here. So it's worth a look, particularly for the fermented items where the specific strains and aging process behind a product can meaningfully affect how much of benefit you're actually getting, something that's easy to overlook when everything on a shelf looks roughly the same at a glance. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Now back to the list, because the next 10 items are where this gets even more specific. Number 9. Quinoa, the complete protein grain that plays a supporting role most people underuse. Quinoa's reputation took a hit once it became trendy, and trendy foods tend to get dismissed by people who assume the hype outpaces the substance. In quinoa's case, the substance holds up. It's one of the rare plant foods containing all 9 essential amino acids in proportions capable of supporting muscle protein synthesis without needing to be paired with another protein source. 1 cooked cup delivers about 8 grams of complete protein alongside complex carbohydrates that restore muscle glycogen, the stored fuel your muscles draw on during any physical activity, from a walk around the block to a full workout. For older adults, glycogen replenishment is frequently overlooked, but without it, the next day's movement feels harder, recovery drags, and the discouragement that follows often leads to less activity altogether, compounding the problem. Quinoa also supplies magnesium and manganese, both involved in energy metabolism at the cellular level, and its natural flavonoids have shown anti-inflammatory activity in early research, positioning it as one of the few foods that supports muscle at both ends of a workout, the fuel needed beforehand and the recovery support needed afterward. Cook it in broth instead of water for a flavor boost. Use it as a warm breakfast porridge with cinnamon and berries, or fold it into a grain bowl with roasted vegetables and a protein of your choice, giving you a base that adapts easily to whatever ingredients happen to be on hand that day. It stores well refrigerated for up to 5 days, making it a realistic weekday staple rather than a special occasion side dish, and rinsing the dry grain thoroughly before cooking removes the naturally bitter coating that gives poorly prepared quinoa its reputation for tasting soapy, a small step that makes an enormous difference in how enjoyable the finished dish actually turns out to be, and one that's skipped far too often by people who tried quinoa once and never came back. Number 10. Pumpkin seeds, the mineral-dense snack that replaces 3 supplements at once. Pumpkin seeds get treated as an afterthought, something scattered on a salad for texture, rather than eaten with intention. That's a missed opportunity, because a single ounce, roughly a small handful, delivers 7 grams of protein alongside close to 40% of your daily magnesium and 14% of your daily zinc. Those 2 minerals do specific, separate jobs that matter enormously for muscle after 60. Magnesium governs both the contraction and the relaxation of muscle fibers, and is a required cofactor in over 300 enzymatic reactions throughout the body. Zinc governs protein synthesis directly and plays a role in maintaining testosterone levels, the hormone most responsible for muscle maintenance in men and women alike as they age. Deficiency in either mineral is common in older populations, and deficiency in both is not rare, often showing up as cramping, slow wound healing, or a blunted sense of taste and smell long before anyone connects those symptoms back to a simple mineral shortfall that a daily handful of seeds can help correct. Pumpkin seeds address both simultaneously, in a form that requires no supplement bottle and no prescription. Toast them lightly in a dry skillet until they begin to pop, which develops a deeper, nuttier flavor. Then salt lightly and store in the refrigerator to protect the delicate fats from going rancid, since the same unsaturated fats that make them so beneficial also make them prone to spoiling faster at room temperature. Add them to oatmeal, yogurt, or salads, or simply eat a small handful daily as a standalone snack. Consistency matters more than quantity here, and buying them raw and shelled in bulk rather than the roasted, heavily salted snack aisle version keeps both the cost and the sodium content considerably lower over time, an easy switch that pays off the more consistently you eat them, and one that costs a little extra effort once it becomes a normal part of your weekly grocery routine. Number 11. Grass-fed beef, the dense amino acid source people over 60 are often told to avoid unnecessarily. Red meat has been broadly discouraged for older adults, often without distinguishing between quality sources and the highly processed versions that deserve the caution. Grass-fed beef, in reasonable portions, is a different food entirely. A 4-ounce serving delivers around 28 grams of highly bioavailable protein with leucine concentration that's difficult to match from plant sources, along with heme iron, the form of iron your body absorbs far more efficiently than the non-heme iron found in legumes and grains. Iron status matters directly for muscle recovery, since iron governs oxygen delivery to working tissue, and low iron leaves muscles fatiguing faster and repairing slower. Beef also delivers zinc, vitamin B12, and creatine, a compound your body produces naturally but in declining amounts with age, and one directly involved in the rapid energy production muscle cells need during activity. Research on creatine status in older adults has linked lower levels to reduce strength and slower recovery, and because the body's own creatine production tends to taper with age, dietary sources like beef become proportionally more important for maintaining the levels that support quick, powerful muscle contractions like catching yourself on a curb before fall. Choose leaner cuts like sirloin or tenderloin, trim visible fat, and favor grilling, roasting, or braising over frying, all which preserve the meat's protein quality while keeping added fat and calories under better control. 3 to 4 modest servings a week, paired with vegetables and fiber, fits comfortably within a heart-conscious eating pattern while still delivering meaningful muscle-building nutrition. And portion size matters more than total elimination here. A 4-ounce serving roughly the size of a deck of cards is enough to capture the benefit without the excess many people mistakenly associate with red meat in general. A portion far smaller than what typically ends up on a restaurant plate, where servings frequently run 2 to 3 times that size without anyone thinking twice about it. Number 12. Black beans, the fiber-forward legume with an inflammation-fighting pigment. Black beans are common in pantries, but rarely appreciated for what makes them nutritionally distinct from other beans. Their dark pigment comes from anthocyanins, the same class of antioxidant compounds responsible for the deep color in blueberries and blackberries, and research has found meaningful concentrations of these compounds concentrated specifically in the bean skin. One cooked cup delivers about 15 grams of protein alongside 15 grams of fiber, an unusually high fiber to protein ratio that supports both digestive regularity, a common concern after 60, and stable post-meal blood sugar. That antioxidant load matters for recovery specifically because physical activity, even gentle activity, generates oxidative stress as a natural byproduct of muscle contraction. In older adults, whose internal antioxidant defenses are generally less robust than in younger people, that oxidative stress can linger and slow the recovery process. Foods that deliver antioxidants alongside protein essentially support two sides of the same process at once, building tissue while helping to clean up the biological byproduct of that building. A dual role that few single foods manage to fill as efficiently or as inexpensively as a simple can of black beans. Black beans are inexpensive, shelf-stable, and can form and endlessly versatile. Add them to soups, mash them with cumin and lime for a quick spread, or fold them into grain bowls, and their neutral, earthy flavor makes them one of the easier legumes to fold into dishes for anyone still adjusting to eating more plant-based protein. Rinse canned beans thoroughly to reduce sodium content before use. And if canned beans tend to cause digestive discomfort, cooking dry beans from scratch with a strip of kombu seaweed in the pot is a traditional trick that softens their effect on digestion considerably, breaking down some of the compounds responsible for the discomfort before the beans ever reach your plate. A method passed down through generations of home cooks long before anyone understood the chemistry behind it. Number 13. Chia seeds, the tiny seed that gels into a complete protein pudding. Chia seeds are frequently reduced to a novelty pudding recipe, which undersells what they actually offer nutritionally. 2 tablespoons deliver about 4 grams of complete protein, along with nearly 10 grams of fiber and a substantial dose of alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid. The seed's defining trait is its ability to absorb roughly 10 times its weight in liquid, forming a gel that slows gastric emptying and creates a steady, gradual release of nutrients into the bloodstream rather than a rapid spike, a quality that supports more sustained amino acid availability over the hours following a meal. Chia is also unusually rich in calcium for a seed, delivering more per ounce than an equivalent serving of milk, alongside phosphorus and magnesium, minerals that work together with vitamin D to support the bone density that protects the musculoskeletal system, holding everything together. For older adults managing both muscle loss and bone density concerns simultaneously, that combination is rarely found in a single food, and the slow, gradual nutrient release the gel structure creates may also help smooth out the blood sugar swings that tend to leave older adults feeling sluggish an hour or two after a carbohydrate-heavy meal. Soak 2 tablespoons in a cup of milk or a milk alternative overnight for an easy pudding. Stir a spoonful into oatmeal or yogurt, or use it as an egg substitute in baking, where its gel-forming property mimics the binding role an egg would normally play. The gel texture also makes it easy to eat for anyone managing chewing difficulty, and because whole chia seeds stay shelf-stable for up to 2 years without refrigeration, keeping a jar on hand means there's always a quick protein and fiber boost available even when fresh groceries are running low, making it one of the more forgiving pantry staples on this entire list, and a genuinely useful item to have stocked for weeks when a full grocery trip simply doesn't happen. Number 14. Tempeh, the fermented whole soy food most Americans have never tasted. Tempeh remains largely unknown in Western kitchens despite being a daily staple across Indonesia for centuries, where it originated as a way to preserve and transform whole soybeans through fermentation. Unlike tofu, which is a processed curd, tempeh retains the entire bean, pressed into a dense, firm cake. A cup delivers around 31 grams of complete protein, a number that rivals chicken breast, but an added advantage chicken doesn't offer. The fermentation process has already partially broken the proteins down, making them meaningfully easier for an aging digestive system to absorb and use. Research comparing fermented and unfermented soy products has consistently found improved protein absorption in the fermented versions, a distinction that matters because it's the difference between eating protein and your body actually being able to use it. The fermentation also introduces beneficial bacteria and reduces the natural compounds in raw soy that make it harder to digest in its unfermented state, which is part why so many people who report feeling bloated or uncomfortable after eating unfermented soy products have no issue at all with tempeh once they try it. Slice it thin and pan fry in olive oil with garlic. Crumble it into a chili or bolognese in place of ground meat, or marinate and roast it for a firmer, meatier texture, letting the marinade soak in for at least 30 minutes, since tempeh's dense structure takes slightly longer to absorb flavor than tofu does. Tempeh absorbs whatever flavors it's cooked with, which makes it an easy substitution in almost any savory dish you already make, and its firm, dense texture holds up far better to reheating than tofu does, making it genuinely practical for anyone cooking in batches for the week ahead, rather than fresh at every meal. Without the mushy breakdown, tofu tends to suffer after a second trip through the microwave, a small practical difference that matters a lot for anyone cooking for one or two. Number 15. Whey protein isolate, the fast-digesting supplement that fills the gaps food alone sometimes can't. This list is built around whole foods, but whey protein isolate earns its place because it solves a real common problem. Appetite naturally declines with age, and hitting daily protein targets through food alone becomes genuinely difficult for many people. One scoop typically delivers 20 to 25 grams of protein with minimal fat and carbohydrate, and unlike casein, whey digests rapidly, delivering a fast, concentrated dose of amino acids, including a particularly high leucine content, directly into the bloodstream within about 30 minutes. That speed matters most immediately after physical activity, when muscle tissue is primed to absorb amino acids and rebuild. Research specifically on older adults has shown that fast-digesting whey protein, taken shortly after resistance exercise, produces a stronger muscle protein synthesis response than the same amount of protein taken passively throughout the day, reinforcing the idea that timing, not just total daily intake, plays a real role in how effectively an aging body converts protein into rebuilt tissue. Choose an isolate over a concentrate for lower lactose content, which matters for the portion of older adults who develop increasing lactose sensitivity with age. Mix it into water, milk, or a smoothie with fruit and a source of healthy fat, and blending it rather than shaking it by hand generally produces a smoother texture that's easier to get down for anyone who finds the gritty consistency of some powders unappealing. It's not a replacement for whole foods. It's a practical bridge to the days when appetite or time makes hitting your target through food alone unrealistic, and checking the label for a minimal ingredient list, protein, a natural flavor, and little else, helps avoid the added sugars and fillers common in lower quality products crowding the same shelf, many of which dilute the actual protein content far more than the label's front of package claims suggest. So it pays to read past the marketing and check the nutrition panel directly. Number 16. Lean cod and halibut, the mild white fish that makes protein easy on difficult days. White fish gets overshadowed by salmon in most nutrition conversations, but for older adults managing appetite loss, dental issues, or general food fatigue, cod and halibut offer something salmon doesn't: an extremely mild flavor and delicate, flaky texture that goes down easy even on low appetite days. A 4-ounce serving of either delivers around 22 to 23 grams of protein with almost no fat, making it one of the leanest, most efficient protein sources per calorie on this entire list. That efficiency matters for older adults who need to hit protein targets without the caloric load that comes with fattier proteins, particularly those managing weight or metabolic conditions where lower calorie intake is a priority alongside higher protein intake. Both fish also deliver selenium and vitamin B12 in meaningful amounts, the latter being one of the most commonly deficient nutrients in adults over 60 and one directly tied to nerve function and the neuromuscular signaling that governs coordination and balance, a deficiency that's frequently mistaken for ordinary age-related clumsiness rather than a correctable nutritional shortfall, one that a couple of servings of white fish a week could meaningfully help address over time. Poach gently in broth or a light court beyond for a soft, easy-to-chew texture. Bake with lemon and herbs at moderate heat to avoid drying out, or flake it into a chowder with a mild flavor blends effortlessly into broth without overpowering anything else in the pot. Because it's so lean, avoid high heat, which toughens the delicate flesh quickly, and frozen fillets, flash frozen shortly after catch, are often nutritionally comparable to fresh while being considerably more affordable and easier to keep on hand, without waste, a practical point for anyone managing a fixed grocery budget while still trying to prioritize quality protein, and one that often surprises people who assumed frozen meant lower quality. Number 17. Kefir, the fermented dairy drink with a broader probiotic range than yogurt. Kefir is often mistaken for a slightly runnier yogurt, but the fermentation process behind it is meaningfully different, using a broader and more diverse culture of bacteria and yeast that ferments for a longer period. A cup delivers around 11 grams of protein alongside a probiotic diversity that frequently exceeds standard yogurt. Some kefir cultures containing 30 or more distinct bacterial strains compared to yogurt's typical handful. That diversity matters for muscle recovery in a way that isn't obvious at first glance. A growing body of research connects gut microbiome diversity to systemic inflammation levels and, increasingly, to how efficiently dietary protein gets broken down and absorbed in the first place. A more diverse gut environment appears to extract more usable amino acids from the same amount of protein consumed, meaning kefir may be quietly improving return on every other protein source on this list. It also delivers calcium, phosphorus, and B12 in forms that are easy to absorb, and unlike a probiotic supplement capsule, Kefir delivers its bacterial cultures alongside a food matrix that appears to help those cultures survive the trip through stomach acid more successfully. Drink it plain, blend it into a smoothie with fruit and a scoop of nut butter, or use it in place of buttermilk in baking and dressings, a swap that adds a pleasant tang while quietly increasing the protein content of dishes that wouldn't otherwise carry much at all. The tart, faintly effervescent flavor is an acquired taste for some, starting with a flavored version, and working toward plain is a reasonable transition. And for anyone with lactose sensitivity, the extended fermentation process breaks down much of the lactose naturally, meaning many people who react to milk tolerate kefir with little to no discomfort, often surprising themselves the first time they try it after years of avoiding dairy altogether based on assumptions that turned out not to fully apply to fermented products. Number 18. Pea protein powder. The hypoallergenic plant option with surprising amino acid strength. Pea protein gets dismissed by people assuming any plant protein powder must be an inferior substitute for whey. But that assumption doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Pea protein isolate delivers roughly 20 to 24 grams of protein per scoop and is particularly rich in branched-chain amino acids, including a strong leucine content that rivals many animal-based powders. Its main limitation, a relatively low methionine content, is easily addressed by pairing it with grain-based food like oats or rice during the same meal, a simple combination that completes the amino acid profile. For older adults managing dairy sensitivity, soy allergies, or simply preferring to reduce animal protein intake, pea protein offers a genuinely comparable alternative rather than a compromise. Research comparing pea and whey protein supplementation in resistance-trained populations has found similar gains in muscle thickness over extended use, a finding that surprised researchers who expected whey to outperform it more significantly, and is a useful reminder that the plant versus animal protein debate matters far less in practice than simply getting enough total protein, consistently, in a form you'll actually keep eating. Pea protein also tends to be easier on digestion for those with any degree of lactose intolerance, since it contains none, making it a straightforward option for anyone who has already had to eliminate dairy from part of their diet, but still needs a reliable supplemental protein source. Blend it into a smoothie with a banana and a spoonful of oats to round out its amino acid profile. Stir into warm oatmeal, or mix into pancake batter for a protein boost that doesn't compromise texture the way some plant powders do. And choosing a version labeled as an isolate rather than a concentrate generally means a smoother texture and less of the gritty mouthfeel that turns some people away from plant-based powders entirely, a small distinction on the label that ends up matching a great deal at the first sip, and one worth paying slightly more for the budget allows it. Number 19. Cottage cheese, the slow-release protein built specifically for overnight muscle preservation. Cottage cheese is high in casein, the slow-digesting dairy protein that releases amino acids gradually into the bloodstream over 4 to 7 hours, a sharp contrast to the rapid spike and decline that comes from whey or other fast-digesting proteins. 1 cup of 2% cottage cheese delivers around 25 grams of protein, and because it's casein-dominant, that protein is still actively feeding muscle tissue 6 hours after it's eaten. This matters enormously for a period most people never think to protect nutritionally: sleep. Muscle protein breakdown accelerates during the 7 or 8 hours when no new amino acids are entering the body overnight, and a slow-digesting casein source consumed before bed directly counteracts that breakdown with steady overnight supply. Research on casein consumption before sleep in older adults has consistently shown improved overnight muscle protein synthesis compared to in a bed without it, meaning the muscle doesn't just stop breaking down. It continues rebuilding through the night, essentially turning a period the body once spent purely losing ground into one where it's holding steady or even making quiet progress instead. Cottage cheese is also soft, requiring no real chewing, inexpensive, and widely available. Eat it plain. Stir in berries for natural sweetness, or blend it smooth with herbs and olive oil for a savory, high-protein dip, a preparation that works equally well as a spread on crackers or a topping for a baked potato. A half cup to a full cup roughly an hour before bed is a practical target, and of every single change on this entire list, this is often the one people notice fastest, waking up feeling less stiff and considerably less depleted than they're used to, sometimes within the very first week of making the swap consistently, which is part of why this particular change tends to stick where others don't. Number 20. Beef liver, the micronutrient-dense organ meat that outperforms multivitamins on nearly every metric. Organ meat fell out of favor over the past several decades, but beef liver in particular remains one of the most nutritionally concentrated foods available, and dismissing it means walking away from a genuine nutritional advantage. A 3-ounce serving delivers about 22 grams of protein alongside an extraordinary concentration of B vitamins, especially B12, folate, and riboflavin, all directly involved in energy metabolism and the neuromuscular signaling that keeps coordination and reaction time sharp with age. Liver also delivers heme iron at a concentration that dwarfs red meat, along with copper and vitamin A, and forms your body absorbs with far greater efficiency than plant-based sources of the same nutrients. B12 deficiency in particular is common in older adults, both due to reduced dietary intake and a natural age-related decline in the stomach's ability to absorb it from food, and liver delivers such a concentrated dose that even a small, occasional serving meaningfully moves a needle, often outperforming a standard multivitamin on this specific nutrient by a wide margin, a comparison that surprises most people once they actually see the numbers side by side. For anyone hesitant about the flavor, start with a milder liver like chicken, or start by blending a small amount of beef liver into ground meat dishes like meatloaf or bolognese, where the flavor becomes far less noticeable, a preparation method that has quietly reintroduced organ meat into plenty of households that would otherwise never touch it directly. 1 to 2 servings a week, even in small amounts, is enough to meaningfully close common micronutrient gaps that no amount of muscle meat alone can fill, and choosing liver from grass-fed, pasture-raised animals when it's available further improves the nutrient density of an already exceptionally concentrated food. Though even conventionally raised liver still delivers a nutritional profile few other foods on the shelf come close to matching, which is worth remembering if pasture-raised. Options aren't available where you shop. 20 foods and one framework underneath all of them. Here's what I want you to take away from this list. Muscle loss after 60 is not a switch that flips on and can't be turned off. It's a gap, a nutritional shortfall that compounds year over year until it starts to look permanent. It isn't. The research is consistent on this point. Muscle protein synthesis slows with age. It doesn't stop. It simply demands more leucine, more consistent protein intake spread across the day, more of the anti-inflammatory and mineral support that lets your body actually use what you feed it, and more attention paid to timing rather than treating protein as an afterthought stacked onto the end of a meal. That means a version of you that feels strong, capable, and steady on your feet is not behind you. It's still buildable, starting with what's on your plate this week. The processed protein bars and stripped-down diet products lining most grocery store shelves were never built with this in mind. They were built to sell, not to rebuild. What actually works is closer to what's on this list: sardines and tempeh and cottage cheese before bed, real food carrying real, specific mechanisms your body has relied on for longevity long before any of it needed a marketing campaign. That knowledge never disappeared. It just stopped being profitable to talk about. Tell me in the comments which food on this list you're adding first. Is it the sardines? The miso? Are you already eating cottage cheese before bed? I read every comment, and I want to know where you're starting from, whether you're beginning with one small swap or rebuilding your whole approach to protein from the ground up. None of this requires a dramatic overhaul overnight, and trying to change all 20 habits at once is usually a faster route to giving up than a slower, steadier approach ever is. Pick 2 or 3 foods from this list, the ones that feel realistic given what's already in your kitchen or your budget, and build from there. Add a handful of pumpkin seeds to your morning oatmeal. Swap your evening snack for cottage cheese instead of crackers. Keep a tin of sardines in the pantry for the days cooking feels like too much. Small, repeatable choices compound the same way neglect does, just in the opposite direction. And a year from now, the difference between the version of you who started this week and the version who put it off will be measurable in your grip strength, in how steady you feel on stairs, and how easy you get up off the floor. None of these 20 foods requires a specialty store, a supplement budget, or a complete personality overhaul around eating. They require attention and a willingness to treat the plate in front of you as something closer to medicine than most of us were ever taught to. The version of you that's still strong, capable, and steady on your feet 10 years from now is being built out of choices made this week, not some distant future you'll get around to eventually. And the sooner that becomes clear, the sooner the trajectory actually starts to bend in the direction you want it to go. If this was useful, subscribe and turn on notifications, because we cover exactly this kind of research every week. The information that mainstream advice keeps leaving out, the kind of specific, actionable detail that gets buried under vague reassurances about eating balanced meals and staying active in general terms.